So today's event, we've got an amazing panel which Sarah will hand over and we'll get them to introduce themselves shortly. But we're focused on discussing how utilities can really create that inclusive decision making, how that can be informed by customers and by colleagues, and how we can take action to really seek the widest range of views we can. So please join in, ask the panel lots of questions, share your views, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sarah. Thank you.
Just going to take a swig of water, hope you don't mind. Thank you, Louise. Eloquent as always. And hi, everyone. It was really lovely to see so many of you here this evening in Northern Gas Networks. This all came about, and I know Louise has explained that this is our first North of Birmingham, I must get it right, or Louise Hunt will shout at me, North of Birmingham event. It came about when I became partnership manager at the One for Northern Gas Networks and spoke to some of your amazing colleagues that are involved in the Women's Network here. And we had a conversation about how me joining the board of the One, coming from Cardiff, being a Welsh girl, that I was a little frustrated at all of the events being based in London. Now, I totally understand why that is. It's much easier to get to for most people. But we had a conversation about, wouldn't it be great if we could get outside of London? And so we made it happen. So I just want to say a big thank you to Hannah and Claire who've made tonight happen, but also Laura, who had that very initial conversation with me, Nadine, who's been fundamental in making tonight happen, and also Helen, who will pretend she hasn't done anything, but she is very much the linchpin of the One. So could we say thank you to all of those people, please? So before we get into it, it really is an impressive panel that we've got here tonight. So can I ask you all just to introduce yourselves to those people that don't know you? Denise, could you start, please?
Oh, sorry. I'll go first. Hi everyone, I'm Louise Hunter. I'm Group Director of People and Corporate Services at Northumbrian Water Group. I've certainly testament to a long career in utilities. I've been with Northumbrian Water Group for my 18-year anniversary next week. I know, coming of age at last in the utilities.
Hi, I'm Denise Massey. I'm Managing Director at the Energy Innovation Centre, which is actually based in near Liverpool, and I'm from North Wales. So yes, delighted to be outside of London for a change, but over in Leeds, who knew? I joined the energy sector, so I joined utilities 15 years ago, and it's been a really interesting ride because I actually came from social care and health, where it's a totally different culture. So it has been a really interesting ride, and it's changed over the last 15 years, but we've still a long way to go, ladies and gentlemen.
Evening everyone, I'm Eileen Brown. I'm the Customer Director here at Northern Gas Networks. So I think I might jump you, I think I'm on my 23rd year now, I know. And when my dad said, don't worry Eileen, this will be a job for life, I thought, shoot me now. But here I am. And you're absolutely right, Denise. You know, we have come a long way. There's still such a way to go. But if I think about the transition, I guess we've been on as an industry, I've seen so much change, but I'm really, truly excited to see what's to come and tremendously proud of the work that we're doing. So yeah, really excited for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mac Alonge. I'm the CEO of the Equal Group. My background is in the energy sector, so I spent 10 years as a regulatory consultant, and essentially kind of saw the barriers that we're going to be talking about today in terms of the lack of representation within the industry. And that led me on a journey to step out of the industry, create the organisation, the Equal Group, to help companies to get a better handle on what needs to be done to really diversify things and give a broader range of people opportunities within the sector.
Thank you all. I forgot to introduce myself in my excitement to introduce the amazing panel. So I'm Sarah Hopkins, as it's used to say on the slide. I'm a director at One, the same as Louise, and I've now got my own my own consultancy company, still working with utilities, but also with charities, which I really love as well. I also was a 23-year in utilities, having worked in Wales and West Utilities up until the end of the year before last. So well versed in all the challenges that we have in utilities as well. So tonight, as Louise has said, our conversation is about levelling up decision making, and that's not a one decision to talk about that tonight, that very much came from the conversation that I had with your NGN colleagues, because it was a conversation that the Women's Network here were having. So we thought we'd go with that theme and actually bring some people along to share their thoughts this evening on that topic. So what we are really interested in thinking about is how do we get bigger voice in decision making in utilities. Clearly, I know there are non-utilities people here this evening, so our lens will be through gender and utilities, but obviously we're thinking about all companies and all matters relating to inclusion as well. So thinking about how we get wider voice in relation to decision making. It's a really important time in utilities, as those of you working in the industry or close to it will know, as lots of focus on the future, and not just the next price control, the next regulatory period, but certainly into what is going to be a net zero future. So lots of work going on in innovation as well, hence why we invited Denise as well this evening. So how are we going to make sure that those decisions that we make for the future that are really important for future generations are really truly inclusive? It's a pickle, I think, but lots of interesting things for us to talk about. So really interesting to hear your thoughts this evening. So I'm going to just quite simply ask you first, Louise, if that's okay. Why do you think? I did to Denise. I went to Denise last, but you misheard me. So why do you think this topic is important? What made you want to come today?
Well, I think that sounds like a trick question, to be honest, because we're here and we're talking about it. So that's a problem in itself, isn't it? You know, I think probably we have succeeded if we don't have to get a network together and then all get in a room and talk about why we need to hear women's voices in conversations. So that's the essence of why it's important, really. I'm absolutely delighted to talk about this all day and all night and all week, as long as anybody will listen to me. So that's why I'm here.
I think having worked in the sector for so many years, it's really recognising, and we talk about it, don't we, that this is it's a big ship to turn. We're in a sector that has got so much history and tradition baked into it that we just kind of take for granted and haven't really challenged until recently. But I think unless we are representative of the communities that we serve, we can't thrive as an organisation and we can't do justice for our customers. So it's incumbent on us to really take on that challenge, no matter how difficult it is. And I think we'll all be frank tonight just about some of those challenges as well. This isn't an easy journey, hence us having to be here talking about it. But I wouldn't be anywhere else, to be honest, because it's just something I'm passionate about.
Thank you. Denise, your thoughts?
Now, why are we here? Yes, it's great, but it's massively disappointing. Because, you know, I have been working for a long time now. And yes, it's getting better, but it's all very incremental, isn't it? And my daughter's 25, and I brought her up, you know, as a feminist, as my son is. And when she got to the workplace, you know, I thought it was going to be different for her because she was coming in 30 years after me. So surely to God, it must be different. And she is facing a lot of the similar challenges that I faced then. And you just think, you know, guys, we're not as far on as we'd like to be. So we do need to challenge. We do need to have our voices heard. And if it means we have to get together like this and then say, and come up with a plan to say, right, how are we going to make it different? Because I'm all about, before I was all about strategy. Let's get the strategy right. Let's get the policy right. And then everything will follow. And I now know it doesn't work like that. You can get the strategy and policy sorted, but we've got to start on the ground. So if we start in Northern Gas Networks, or if you take something away from tonight that gives you a little bit of a kernel of something to say, right, I'm going to go and have a go. It is the movement, you know, from bottom up and top down, and that's how we'll get the change. But we do need to make it a bit faster than it is already, I would say.
Thank you. Mac, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, I think it's important for me to be here as a man. I did kind of question whether I needed to be here. I didn't want to break up kind of an all-female panel because I think rooms like this are super important, and we could go around the room and I'm sure everyone's had examples of issues that they've faced and problems that they faced with the sector. We'd be here for weeks and weeks talking about people's stories, and that's horrendous. But I think I wanted to dispel the myth that this is just a women's problem. This is something that men need to get behind. I'm slightly disappointed at the lack of men here today, because I think we intentionally wanted men to be in the room to hear the stories, to hear the work that needs to be done. So thank you to the few men that are here, but we need to do more to kind of shout about the issues and make sure that this isn't perceived as just a women's issue.
Because if women get equality, men also get equality. It works both ways, doesn't it?
Thank you. And I know in our pre-conversation, we had a conversation about how important it was that this was a Women's Utilities Network event, but that we would be looking through the lens of gender, but that we took it more broadly, and we will definitely come on to that later. And I really do hope that the panel now step up to what Denise has said. I'm going to give you loads of practical tips and hints to leave today with. But we're going to start with just a general question to anybody that wants to take it. I'm really passionate about the topic of psychological safety. So Louise talked earlier about that's something that we've been talking about in lots of our organisations, and particularly at the one, and we're hosting an event on it in May. So I'm really interested in that concept through the lens of your organisations or those that you work with, in terms of one of the important elements of psychological safety is making sure people feel safe to speak up and have their voices heard. So in light of that, how do you think businesses should be capitalising on the power of employee voice in decision making?
Yeah, it's really important, because, you know, you've got to be able to give voice. You know, I like you, was kind of in a place, I think, originally of kind of strategy and policy. I'll fix it, and if that doesn't, then I'm just going to get myself into a really good leadership position, and then that'll be able to fix it. And yes, you need all of those things, but you need them right through an organisation so that everybody feels empowered to speak. And we've had an initiative that's been running for a little while now at Northumbrian Water called Safe to Say. And I think it was quite amusing, certainly from my perspective, coming new into sort of people in HR space, that the first instinct of the organisation was, we need a system. We need somewhere people can write this stuff down and email somebody, or we need a hotline. And yes, we do need those things. That's absolutely right. But more than anything, we need a culture that enables that, so that when people have the courage to speak up, and they're made to feel that they can have the courage to speak up, they get a positive reception to whatever it is that they want to say, and they're heard and listened to, and then things acted on upon that. So I think that it's really important that you can't just think about kind of the policies and the processes and the strategy and getting women into leadership positions and hearing the voices there. There has to be channels to change the cultures so that people can feel that they can be safe to say whatever it is that they need to say, and therefore you start to get a volume of voice being heard at all levels and get the changes happening too.
Just while we change mics, have you got any, this side, have we got, Louise, have you got any sort of early early results from that?
Yeah, I think probably one of the things, and I know that's a bit of a trick question to me, Sarah, because we were talking about this earlier. So I've recently taken on a new role, and as part of my new role, I've got responsibility, unbelievably, for buildings and estates, and I'm learning a lot about buildings and estates. And I'm currently doing a toilet audit. I know, it's exciting stuff at the cutting edge of leadership. And one of the things that has uncovered is in looking at toilets and speaking to lots of women across the organisation on toilet facilities and showering facilities, which are pretty important when you're working in sewerage. It turns out that actually we're not as good as we thought we were across our buildings. And I wouldn't have found that out if I hadn't gone and looked for myself and talked to women in environments where they felt safe to say the things that were really on their mind and bothering them on a day-to-day basis. We've also had an interesting example where we've gone all out recruiting young female apprentices left, right and centre across the business. Brilliant. Getting them into roles, all their kind of male allies super positive about them being there. Nobody really thought about how a female apprentice on her own in a van with a middle-aged man driving around rural Northumberland was going to go at the toilet when she was on her period. And the absolute dying of embarrassment for her to have to raise that with a line manager and try and explain that she actually needed some toilet breaks really, really brought it home to that team. brilliant and good on her that we've got a culture with a great manager in that team, male manager, that enabled her to say that. But, you know, that just shows the power in those tiny examples of kind of how important it is for people to be able to say what their real experience, lived experience of work is.
Yeah, I think, I guess my mind kind of goes back, because it's always cyclical, isn't it? Trying to build trust and making sure that you're fostering a culture, which we've been doing now at NGN for a number of years in a number of different ways. And I guess what I've learned from that is there isn't one solution to that. You just have to keep on doing lots of different ways and refreshing it. So a number of years ago, we used to get kind of people together in a room, a really open room, and create a culture just in that safe space to say some of those things that were really niggling you. It was like, just bring out those things and have a moan, and we will listen, and then actually we will help you try and sort those things out. I guess as we kind of matured and thought about those safe spaces, and it was some work we did around inclusion and belonging, thinking maybe 2 or 3 or even 4 years ago now, when we created the concept of the colleague communities, of which Anna and the women's community is one of them. It was all about thinking, well, you know, what are those groups within our organisation that don't have their voice heard? And it isn't just about women. It's about, I think I noticed, it's about parents and carers. It's about kind of the older people in our organisation that've got experiences to share. And how can they come together and discuss those issues that are right for them and come forward together with those recommendations? So you've got that solidarity in that group, and you're hearing all those different things. I think it's just a different way, isn't it, of getting those views heard. I guess some actually created their own energy straight away, where there was a real passion. Some it took a bit more effort to get up, and some are still waiting in the wings to come forward. So again, that's a learning around, just because you might not hear from a certain segment of your organisation doesn't mean that they don't want to talk and there aren't stories there. It's just sometimes harder to coordinate around it and get that energy. I think with the women's community, actually, it was so natural. It'd been needed for such a long time, and it really gave you that avenue and that energy. And then as soon as you started with some of those successes, it's like, well, just it powers you on, doesn't it? And I think that's been the case across a number of those communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, when I think about psychological safety, I think about kind of 3 aspects. The first is speaking, the second is listening, and the third is action. So in terms of speaking, how do we create environments that are safe for people to actually say truly what they believe? And by that I mean, often you'll find leaders that are saying things like, tell us your thoughts, tell us how it feels to work here. And actually, there's a little bit of a weird dynamic in that, because you're missing out on the power dynamic. So as somebody that's really early on in their career, how do you talk to the CEO or the senior leader and tell them, actually, this is a really toxic place for me, or this is a really unsafe environment for me? So as the Equal Group, we specialise in data, and when we think about data, we're talking both quantitative and qualitative. The qualitative data is probably the most fundamental, because people's stories, people's experiences, and we act on the basis of anonymity. So we protect everyone's anonymity and make sure that their individual identity can't be revealed. So that creates a safe environment for them to say exactly what they're feeling, what's on their mind, what their experiences are, without that fear of saying, will my future be in jeopardy if I say this, if I say that actually I really hate my line manager? Will they then take that personally and prevent my career from progressing? So that's the aspect, that you have to create environments that are safe for people to speak. You then have to, as leaders, put yourself in a position to really deeply understand them. Some of the more problematic things that we see is leaders that say, you know, I've never experienced that. Well, yeah, of course you've never experienced it, because you're not in the same shoes as that person, you're not in the same circumstance. There is a privilege that comes from being at leadership level, where you don't generally experience the culture as your entry-level staff experience it. So a lot of the work we do with leaders is training them to put themselves in the mind of their employees, building that empathy to understand what might this person be experiencing at this level of the organisation, or in this specific department, in these specific circumstances. And the next thing is action. So what then comes once you've heard people's stories, once you've understood the problematic behaviours, how then do you change things? And there's a great comment by Louise in terms of actually noticing the gaps. and being proactive about, okay, how do we create facilities for people? You know, some of the basics in terms of hygiene, in terms of sanitation. You know, what can we do to tell people, or send a message to people that tells them that we value their input, we value their perspective, and we value their safety.
Thank you all. And just to share an anecdote of mine, which really sort of rings true to what you said, when we did something similar in Wales and West, where we'd sit and talk to groups of colleagues and really be in the listening mode. And somebody that was a man, actually, so, you know, not a gender issue, but said to me, Sarah, I see the world out of the window of my van every day, and you guys at leadership level need to help me to understand how that fits into the bigger picture. And I think that's just something that's really stuck with me from, I don't know, 15 years ago, just thinking about it at that sort of walking in other people's shoes, for sure. Yeah, of course.
Just in relation to the, you know, this impacts on everybody. I think it's around, I know we're talking a specific area, aren't we? But this is not just unique to women. And you said about new entrants into the industry. We work with, so we're in an innovation. So innovation is, again, trying to create change in the businesses, which is quite difficult. And we were talking to a lot of the graduates that come in to some of the utilities. And their biggest problem was they did not feel, talk about psychological safety, they didn't feel safe in them. So from innovation, we need our graduates to go in and say to people who are 45 years in the industry, why are you doing it like that? And of course, they didn't feel they had the right. They didn't feel they had the rights because it's disrespectful, all sorts of different things that go on. So there is something about, and I do think it comes from leadership, about how leadership sets the tone that creates the culture. Because the culture, if you get your culture right, it would make everybody feel safe to say on any issue, wouldn't it? So I think, yeah, top down.
Thank you. Oh.
I think there's something about, and I'm going to look at Lindsay, who worked at NGN for a number of years, and one of your favourite phrases was, it's okay also to not say the right thing. And there's something in that, being brave enough to say, listen, I don't understand what's right and wrong here, because the problem is trying not to stifle people from being themselves. You want everybody to come to work to be themselves. So I think there's something in that, considering there's a safe space here for you to talk, and it's actually okay. Don't be worried about saying the wrong thing. It needs to be out there, and then we can understand through unconscious bias and through microaggressions training that we've done around, well, why might somebody receive that in a different way? Why might it be offensive? Why might it not land in how you, because it's how you perceive it and how you say it, and it can often, a lot can get lost in translation, particularly in those in an industry like ours where there are many generations working in potentially one team, one office, one van, and it's trying to bridge that gap, isn't it?
So really good conversation about what's going on internally in organisations, and I have a question already with me from the NGN's women community. So Eileen, I'll start with you, and I know you're kind of going to be biased.
Lindsay.
You're going to be, but you're going to be biased. You've got the mic. So I'm just interested, and I'd like to move on to the external piece in a minute. So short answers, please. What role do you see colleague networks playing in helping organisations level up decision making at a strategic level?
Yeah, gosh, I see them playing a huge role. They've got to exist, and they have to have the support from leadership within the organisation. So we've really worked hard to make sure that the colleague communities have an executive sponsor. That's not to take the decision making away. It isn't, but it's to give them the support to make sure that that conversation they're having can be supported and that action can be supported. So I think it's vital, and just creating that space to make sure that colleagues can get involved, because if they can't, then they're not going to be able to have those conversations that can lead to effective change.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, very similarly, we have colleague networks, and that's been absolutely invaluable, and equally have the kind of exec sponsors for each of those networks. But I think what it's been really helpful is giving people that kind of strength in numbers, confidence to say things and realise it's not just them, and there's other people around them that are feeling in a similar way. And also for those people who aren't kind of into being in a club or a network or anything, giving those people somewhere to go and just kind of give a voice to any concerns they've got, so that others can carry it on their behalf. So I think the networks are play an absolutely crucial role in raising that voice and helping decision making.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to add, I think networks are a gift to organisations, and I really wish that organisations would invest more in their networks, because they give you so much information, so much opportunity for change. It's about really realising which issues are individual, which issues are kind of concentrated in different areas, but also which issues are affecting people across the organisation. I'm also a really big supporter of one, in terms of having cross-industry networks where people can collaborate, can galvanise, and really share experiences across the sector, because I think looking at things from a sector-wide perspective is kind of how you make that long-term change.
Definitely. The first ever time I walked into a one board meeting, everyone hugged me. I've never had that in a board situation before. So it was a very welcoming environment to be in, but no, absolutely, thank you. So I'm just interested in the kind of learnings that you got, and sorry, Louise, and God, sorry, I only called you Yvonne then. sorry. I'm really interested, I know you two in particular have done quite a lot of work through your organisations on enhancing customer engagement that has been obviously sort of proposed by the regulator, but I know that you two in particular in your organisation have really picked it up and run with it. So I'm just interested in that angle in terms of customer voice, but particularly through what have you learnt from your enhanced customer voice that you think that organisations can bring in internally to really focus not only on the kind of practical and tactical decision making, but on that real strategic decision making?
Picking on me all night. I know. Gosh, so I'm thinking about all the different channels we've got. So I think first of all, to have and be able to reach into the communities that you serve and get those voices that are often hard to hear or quieter is vital. To make sure that the decisions that you're making as an organisation really reflect the communities that you serve. So we do that in a number of ways. We've got our citizens panel, and it's inclusive by design. So it covers the demographics that we see in the socioeconomic across our network, and we take to them problems that we have as organisations. We ask them what issues they want to talk about. We also have our Young Innovators Council. So those are 15 to 18-year-olds who we meet with as regularly as we meet with our citizens panel. I think what I'd say there, my immediate observation about kind of decision making is the conversation differs massively with our current customers as it does our future customers. And when we've talked to our future customers, our young innovators very recently, they've said to us, really don't talk to us about your business right now. We want to talk about the future of your organisation because we're the ones that are going to be paying those bills in 20 years' time. So even just at a very fundamental level about what is it that you are materially bothered about. So current customers, inclusivity, it's how much are my bills costing? And the many different views you get from all the different people that you talk to on that for very different reasons. But those young people talk to me about the future. That's the conversation I want to be in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have, it's got loud all of a sudden. We have a setup, I guess, around an external customer engagement panel that has kind of representation from a number of different groups. But I guess sitting underneath that, most importantly, is kind of the outreach that we have into various networks of meeting people on their turf. So, you know, kind of customer engagement and co-creation for us always happens out there in the community where the customers live, and that's where you get the real answers to things. And we're big fans of taking project managers before they go out to start a big project where they might be disrupting a community out into that community and listening to the customers from all different backgrounds and experiences about that community and what they need to be careful and what they need to think about. And I'll give you some practical examples of that. We kind of were talking about different customer journeys, and one of the customer journeys we were talking about is what people experience when their water goes off. And sometimes that can happen by something that's planned because we're doing some works, and sometimes it's unplanned. And in the instances when we plan it, we had a group of project managers who were kind of going along the lines of, because we'll turn off the water in the middle of the night because nobody needs the water then. And, you know, nobody's going to miss the water if it goes off for a couple of hours at certain times. And the proposal that we're putting forward to this community, we're kind of saying, yes, but you're right in the middle of religious festivals and fasting periods, and do you realise the impact that has? And it hadn't even occurred to them. So there's real value in bringing people who are frontline or working in these kind of decision-making roles into the community so that they actually hear from customers the impact of their decisions. So we get a huge amount of value from engaging in the networks in that sort of way as well.
Thank you. Go on.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think we're at a crucial time in kind of the evolution of the industry, because I think what has traditionally been quite a transactional approach to customer engagement is now shifting towards a more intentional one. It's about building relationships. I think one of the key things about building those relationships is communicating to our end users that actually this isn't just about your water supply, but it's also about investing in you as individuals and giving people the impression that actually they can have a future working in the organisation. So it's not just necessarily about informing future strategy from our end user perspective, but it's also come and be part of this team, come and be part of us, because we want our organisation to reflect the communities that we serve. So I think that is going to be crucial over the next couple of years in terms of how we transition from a transactional relationship to more of a community-focused, embedded relationship.
Thanks. And Louise was telling me a story on the way over here in the taxi about how Northumbrian Water have been looking for apprentices, and the nervousness was around the sector and the kind of reputation and what that would do to applications. But actually their experience was quite different in terms of lots and 1,000 people, wasn't it, or something like that? Yeah, 1,000 people? No?
We had over 1,000 applications for 40 roles just last week. So incredible.
And the whole the key message that came from applicants was we want to be part of the solution, not just actually that's an old kind of sector. We want to come and roll our sleeves up literally and be part of the solution. I'm going to turn to you guys. Oh, go on. Yeah.
But the challenge is, once you got them in, how are you going to retain them? And that's where this thing about, so we're saying about going from stakeholder voice to why the community voices is, the decision has to be levelled down to bring it up, because to make good business, it's fiduciary duty of the directors of the business to create future. And the future, the Gen Zs are saying, we want purpose, we want engagement, we want flexibility, we want all these things. And they want all the things that in a way that the industry doesn't operate today. So we have to, it's not like a great grand gesture to say thanks very much for chatting. It's actually the information we glean from colleagues is actually helping us shape future strategy and creating businesses that they want to come and work in, Sorry, jumping in there. Have you noticed how women always apologise? Will we stop that? Sorry, guys.
Oh, sorry, Denise. Sorry, Louise. Sorry, Sarah. But it just reminds me of the conversation we had, didn't we, about you can get your recruitment strategy right and you can get your engagement kind of strategy right internally, but sometimes there's something missing in that. And we talked about chicken and egg, didn't we? And we can do a really fantastic job of trying to recruit a diverse workforce of colleagues into your organisation, but if you're not quite ready, then people, especially the Gen Zs, will move on very quickly. They'll think, actually, that's not what I read the label and that's not what's in the tin. I've come and actually, women, I've not got the right, I'm going to say PPE, because it's a real bugbear of mine. I have trotted around sites for donkey's years in oversized, I know, oversized jackets with the shrug of the shoulders and, well, why are you bothered? Is it that you want to look nice? No, I just want to look professional. That is it. So I think you've got to be ready for it, haven't you? And be ready and that this is where the speed of change comes in. We lose good talent because we're just not moving fast enough, I think. So, I think engagement piece is spot on and we have to do that, but there's something in that pace of change as well.
And it's... Sorry. I know! Right, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Jim. But it is critical, because if you look at, and looking from energy and utility skills, where Louise is from, if you look at the demographic in the industry and you look at the talent that's leaving the industry in droves, what we have to do is stem the tide, and what we have to do is train up the people who are coming in, and all of you people in the room, you know what they need to do is ideally keep you all for the next 20 years. But chances are, if we don't shift, we'll be looking for something a little bit more exciting somewhere else. So it's a real now problem that needs to be addressed, she said, without apologising.
Absolutely. I hope someone's keeping a sorry tally at the back, just so we can check. So Denise, hold the mic though, please. I'm going to come to you. No, genuinely, I'm going to come to you guys next. So I've just got one last question. So I can't, being here today, not mention today's EHRC new guidance on menopause in the workplace. So just obviously it has started to give some guidance on possible support options and legal obligations under the Equality Act, which is great. What are your thoughts, Denise? We were chatting about it earlier. So.
No, we were. Baseline is, I think it's fantastic, because whatever it does to highlight the issue, to say, you know, I am of that generation that we didn't talk about menopause. We just did not talk about it, and everyone cracked on. Nobody mentioned it until I started to suffer. Now, I know I was talking to some colleagues. I thought I was going to have to give up work, and I thought I was going to have to, now I'm running a business. I thought I was going to have to give it up because I thought I'd lost my mojo. I couldn't hold a thought. I couldn't string a sentence. And I thought there was something seriously wrong with me. But by the way, I didn't have hot flushes, because that's what you get when you have menopause. So it couldn't be the bloody menopause. Anyway, I watched Davina McCall, who is now my hero. And I watched her programme, and I was like, oh, that's me. So I said to the guys, my advice to anyone suffering is lie to your GP. I rang and said, how long? 2.5 years, because I guessed it had been quite a while, but I'd just been living with it. And I got my patch, and now anybody who's in a meeting with me, male or female, if you lose a thought, I'm offering you a patch. It's completely changed, given me my brain back, given me my life back, given me my job back. And going back to retention, we need to keep as many people in the workforce as possible. And given the sorts of communities we want to create in business, women are really good at that. So we need a lot more women leaders. And they will may well be a little bit older because experience and all the rest of it. So there will be arguments against menopause not being part of the Equality Act. But I would argue it's a brilliant first step, because it's putting it on the agenda to say this is important for business to tackle. I have no doubt over time it will evolve and it may fall off. But it's like everything with maturity. It's a bit like the equality, equal opportunities in business. It shouldn't be a principle, but it was 20 years ago. It was a principle because we didn't have equal opportunities. So for me, it's the same sort of thing. That this is a statement, and it's like great, marvelous.
Isn't it? I'm not going to apologise. Isn't it great to have a conversation like this in a room, but it's almost entirely full of women. So I'm just really curious, who would feel comfortable having that conversation in an open office in their workplace? Right, the rest of you, come on. Now, I know they've got this thing where they're putting menopause jackets on men or whatever it is that they're doing to help them to experience it. I actually also think if they're going to experience it properly, they need to be hit over the head with Davina's book to give them the memory thing too. So, yeah, it's just really interesting, isn't it? You know, we need to be, all of us, men included, talking about these sorts of things very, very openly, just like you would any other topic.
Thank you. Right, we need to take to the floor. So who has a question for our panel? Thank you. I think we're going to bring you a mic. Thanks, Helen. Oh, yeah, there's just one behind you a second, and then we'll come to you next. Thank you. Can you just say who you are and then ask a question, if that's okay?
Hi. Oh, well, I'll just have a loud voice. We've talked a lot about levelling up the women's conversation in our businesses. How do we do it for the customers in our plants? And not just for women, other minorities. So, say the Green Book was updated that, say, lower income communities, when we do the business cases, we're investing in them. When I work for utilities and I do investment planning, that's not really a thing. It's a big thing for, say, communities that do need levelling. For example, for flooding, if a property is flooded, there's a 3-year mental health issue to that property. 3 years for just a flood event. And we know that climate change is going to be a bigger thing. And we know that in lower income communities, are more likely to be affected by climate change. So I'm interested to see how you think these levelling up conversations are being brought into your businesses and your decision making.
Thank you.
I can have a go if you like. I kind of am probably going to refer back to sort of the example I've given earlier. I think you're absolutely spot on. It's not in planning. You know, nowhere when we're doing environmental impact assessments and that side of things are we thinking about the social or kind of human impact in not that kind of way anyway. And so what's happening, I think, is that the pieces are being picked up in customer service. So where certainly our business is picking that up is when you look at customer service and we look at the customer journeys of things, so flooding, the example that you had there, that's when we're kind of going, right, what is that person's lived experience? And actually, again, we've had some really, really powerful things and actually videoed with the support of customers, people who've experienced flooding and the impact it's had on them and their well-being and their health and the family's health, because it's the worst customer failure that we can experience in our business. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's disastrous. And by having that and being able to share that lived experience with colleagues does make people think more seriously, obviously, but also very differently about how they plan their works and the impact and the value that their role is bringing in solving those problems as well. So there's a really positive internal engagement aspect to doing that. But I think you're right, it's not in the planning, but I see it really at the moment being mainly picked up in that kind of customer service element in the journeys that we plan for customers.
Normally known for a quiet voice. It's a really great question, because I think as soon as you said it, I thought, gosh, I don't think we've ever looked at it like that as an organisation, as to where we should be doing our capital investment, and are we doing that in the right communities. I think we let the engineering kind of lead us down the path that it leads us, and could we look at that in a different way? We potentially could. I think, I guess to counteract that, we would, on any job, look at the stat in the gas world is you would only serve a customer once in their lifetime. So you've only got one opportunity to really make an impact. So we use that opportunity to make sure that that customer gets every opportunity to say what they may need. And we train our engineers to make sure they can recognise and offer whatever is needed at that time. So I guess that's a kind of way of making sure when we're in a community and we're on that job, we are making sure that not only are people not disadvantaged, but they're absolutely getting all the opportunities that we have got to offer them, and also our partner organisations have got to offer them. And then for the other, however many customers that we don't impact once in their lifetime, so it's every 43, 44 years, we do see it as our role to go into communities and create projects that really do help those parts of our network that need the help the most. So I think in that respect, we're really active. I think it's definitely something we can take back and look at our investment strategies and think, could we be making a different decision here? Or at least build it in some analysis of what is going to be the impact, the economic impact of that project in that area, and is that the right thing? Is there a trade-off there?
I guess the thing is it systematic though? Because if you want to go away and affect change tomorrow, it's about where do you take that and how do you challenge it? But we've just really illustrated why you have to listen to all your stakeholders and all your partners, because you've got a really unique issue. How do we capture that? Because that, as Eileen and Louise have said, it's a brilliant, brilliant point. It's not one that the businesses would want to ignore, it's just that they don't have that lens. We do that systematically. Now these companies got, because obviously I'm on the outside now, so sorry about this. I didn't know whether you could hear me or not without. I assumed you could. But, they've got customer engagement groups and independent stakeholder groups and things. About providing feedback into those groups, because those groups are, I'm sure there should be other systematic ways of contractors feeding back in, but they are there to challenge the businesses when they're doing their business planning, that they're looking at it from all those angles. So I don't think you definitely shouldn't lose it. And it is a way of how you can have your voice heard.
Sorry, can I ask a question back? What I'm just really curious now. What would be the channel for you to feed that back in that scenario? Because you're right, you've got a really unique lens on sort of a problem that is being. I always think about kind of source and end of pipe sort of solutions, but you're kind of looking at a source and I'm fixing at end of pipe. So how do you feed that in? Do you have a route for that?
It's just been, so I've been doing some work for the National Infrastructure Commission, and one of the big things was levelling up, and it was interesting to see that vision from the policy side, that there was only one way, and if, like you all said, this is the way we've always done it. And I think if you ever go to customer engagement events, it kind of, I don't know, the ones that I've ever been to, you kind of get the same crowd all the time. And I think there's a lot to be said of the capacity to cope and the capacity to have a voice, because if you're someone who's having to work 50 hours this week, you're not going to be going to a customer engagement event. And I think there's a lot to be thinking about, how not just ticking the EDI bits, but actually how we make it inclusive for the communities that are really hard to reach, and actually we can have the most impact, because we can only be what we can see. And if we're not in them communities, there's no aspiration there for them people to be coming into our organisations and then having that diverse organisation, because otherwise we're just surrounding ourselves with professionals who come from a professional environment, who have seen these jobs around and about, or have family members. Because otherwise you're just a community that gets ignored. And even if you get these people into the organisations, if your projects aren't helping the communities you've come from, you're going to get disengaged. So yeah, I don't know really how to feed it back. We talk about social outcomes a lot now, but I'm not sure beyond CSR whether it's really got into the organisations and how we plan capital investments.
No, it's really thought-provoking though, so thank you for that. Definitely going to take that back and mull on that one a bit more and think about what we do with that.
Thank you. There was a question here. Sorry, Helen first.
Hi, I'm Janet. I'm not working in the utilities industry, but I work across a number of different industries with clients. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is the impact that remote working has had on people and having their voices heard. I'd just be interested to understand the initiatives that you guys have taken on to make sure that people who are working remotely, who may not have the confidence and have lost the psychological safety of being around the water container, having their voice heard, so they don't lose opportunities for promotion. So just be very interested to hear what sort of stuff you're doing.
Yeah, sorry, really interesting question. And I think we've all collectively been on a journey over the last couple of years in terms of getting to grips with remote working as default. I think one of the things that immediately came to mind, kind of in response to your question, is empathetic leadership. So to what extent can we empathise with people that maybe for personal circumstances or maybe a disability aren't as engaged as other people, or potentially have to work remotely as standard? To what extent do we do our processes accommodate for that? To what extent do we appreciate their lens in terms of how they show up in the workplace? But I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier in terms of the menopause, and also the lady's question around kind of communities. Unfortunately, we've got a default position where leaders tend not to care unless it impacts them personally. And I think that speaks to the earlier point in terms of the importance of representation, the importance of people being represented at the kind of leadership positions, leveling up that conversation. Again, that needs to be taken into consideration from a remote working perspective as well. So some of the things that we've seen with leadership teams are actually, if you've got people on those leadership teams that work remotely, to what extent are they considered in the same light as people that don't? To what extent do part-time people or job shares, and just different ways of working, different ways of considering progression outside of the norm. And I think the more we can do to understand different experiences and different people, the better we'll all be.
Yeah, I think it certainly presents a challenge in terms of having the confidence to be able to engage. I wouldn't, and we don't underestimate the power still of coming face to face like we are doing today. But I think what we've recognised, and I think every organisation will have been on this journey, is you've just got to create that space to do that in working time, that's at a time that's right for most people to be able to come. And the purpose is just that you're going to spend time together. There's not necessarily going to be a strong business outcome. There's not a reason that, you're not coming together on a specific piece of work necessarily. You're just coming together to get to know one another, particularly for those people that potentially joined the organisation during COVID and then maybe hadn't seen any of their colleagues or met them face to face for 12, 18, 24 months, which we experienced here. Just that very first coming together face to face and making that something that you do just because that's important. And it's important to be in a room together like it is tonight, so that then you have the confidence, you feel like you know people, to be able to go away and then have the confidence to be able to engage online with your team. So yeah, I think that there's certainly been something in that for us, just creating that space and it not being about getting work done, it being about just coming together.
Yeah, I just wanted to make an additional point on gender and all of this. So I was reading some really worrying statistics about how women are more predisposed to take advantage of hybrid working. And so I think in terms of unconscious bias, one of the things that's going to be creeping in is a kind of perception on presenteeism. And I think women in particular, if they're working in hybrid ways, become even less visible in their roles. And so I think there's a real risk for gender progression because of that. I'm certainly noticing it actually in a really interesting way, and I'm doing something about this. But in my role, I do an awful lot of external networking, and before COVID, it was 4 nights a week, and That's kind of eased way back now. But the events are still happening, not as frequently, but there's still kind of a couple a night. And I've really noticed the women have dropped out of those events. I'm quite often now in kind of CBI, Chamber of Commerce, these kinds of events, and there's very few women in the room. And I'm really concerned that we've lost a generation, probably of sort of middle management women who haven't been in the habit of network or haven't had allies that have brought them into networks. And so we're doing something particularly across the Northeast to find the talented women and bring them back into networks so that they learn how to do that and form those senior leadership networks. So it's one for all of you to watch. Well done in being here tonight. That's a brilliant start, brilliant. But just think about how you encourage others to kind of keep your visibility up, because I think that's a massive risk for us.
It has been really interesting because we've done so we're a small business, and we had, after COVID, we had massive turnover as well, because all of a sudden people who couldn't work in London, who were working with us, could start working back in London and commanding London prices. So we had a real challenge, because 60% of the business left and we had to try and start again. And of course we're doing this through COVID, so lots of new people on. And the other thing we learnt again from listening to them was lots of graduates starting, so they're young, and what they were missing, so they just left university and they were coming into work, but they weren't coming into work, they were sitting in their rooms somewhere. And actually you could start to see the level of, from mental health issues and things that were creeping in. And again, learning from my daughter and son were in similar positions. My daughter had gone to London and was living in an upstairs flat, working remotely, and had never seen her colleagues. So, and learning, it was really interesting learning from everybody's, listening and everybody's experience. So we started to say, and because we are collegiate, we were like, so guys, I think we should go back to the office. And everyone's like, no, not really, thank you. So, okay, So we said, okay, because one of the reasons we knew, again, as a small business, what makes us work, as it does in big business, is community, is operating as a community. And what we didn't have was we didn't have community. And so exactly as Eileen was just explaining is we started to say, okay, let's get back for 2 days a week, okay? Everybody's agreed, business need, we would need to do that. Then we had to say, no, I'm really sorry, guys, but we are now going to have to make an instruction that you need to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's what we agreed. And we said, because there is a business need and also it's in a duty of care to you that we need to bring you in. And the morale in the business shot up. And the other thing then we had then was cost of living crisis. Now, even though we're a living wage organisation, people had got used to not paying travel costs. So it's like, well, what do we do about that? So we decided to introduce lunches. But we couldn't introduce it just for the people who were on the low wage, because how do you do that? So we created what we call community lunches. So we just started to pay for everyone to have lunch. And you know what? Wasn't that expensive, David? And not picking on the finance director at NGN at all. Well, it was a bargain. But what was incredible was because then we started making cooked meals and they were doing it together, everyone started having lunch together. So what started as feeling like it was a bit of an edict, it shifted the community really, really quickly. And so everyone started to feel part of it. They all decided we'd do a refurb. We needed a bit of a refurb. And so now there's such a sense of ownership about the business. And now people can go back to remote. So we're back to quite flexible working, but we have a core where people come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But it is flexible because, as you know, we need flexible working. So I think it is, and that was by accident, not by design.
Thank you. A question at the back. We do have a few questions to get through in our panel.
So
okay.
Mine's probably not so much a question, more a reflection on what you were saying. I work for a research agency who do a lot of work in the utility sector. And I've been particularly marked lately by the changes in the kind of bids that we're going for. We've recently won work for water efficiency in faith and diverse communities, which is a really long, very expensive project, but is being done because there is a real notice within the utility sector that this is necessary. This kind of embedded cultural work is necessary if you're going to reach out to the sectors of society that find it far more difficult to attend, like an online focus group, for example, which is a lot of what we do. So it was more of a notice that is happening, and a welcome as a qualitative researcher through and through, that as a thank you for that. But a side note, in terms of the menopause debate, I find it quite difficult to say this, but I am in full-blown medical menopause because of cancer, so it's quite difficult to hear possibly quite flippant comments about the patches, but it is a really complicated debate and one that is really hard to advocate for ourselves for. I welcome it, but I think it's really important to notice the nuances in it, and how difficult it can be, even in a company that has 4 female directors, to say these kind of things.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really, really good to hear your honesty. We've got a question down here. Helen?
Mine's a slight continuation probably of the last one, but I'm Heather from Northern Gas Networks. So I guess I'm lucky enough to have a lot of women in my team, and it's great, and I have done for many years, even before NGN. And I remember once I was sitting in a leadership team meeting, and it was myself, and it was all men, as normal, and the HR business partner, who was the only other female, and she stood up and she said, "Oh, I'm tired, I'm going home, I've got my period." And I sat there, I was like, oh my God, I sat there aghast, like I can't believe this has happened. And she just walked out with confidence, and it kind of inspired me to, even myself as a female, felt that was shocking. So what since then, working with women, I've always really encouraged that conversation to say, how are you feeling? It's okay to talk about the fact that you feel like crap because you've got your period. It's the same with menopause. It's the same for women with endometriosis. It's the same when women have miscarriages. I've seen too many women come to work and not feel that they can talk about it. And I think for me, it's really important that, because from that, having that confidence and talking about how you're really feeling comes other confidence, and it gives women that voice in different circumstances. And for me, I guess my question is, how do we make it not just the female leaders that give that in their team? And the men have to deal with this in my team as well. They just sort of like are used to it now. It's not a thing just for the girls when we just are talking. But how do we, because I think that's something we can do right now. It's a piece of change that can really action. And I think from that, it's quite powerful. It gives women confidence to talk about a lot of things that are really, really difficult for them. And, it's always, women's problems. Let's not talk about it. It's that taboo. We need to push that out more. Anyway, that's my question. What more can we do right away to create that environment?
I think it has to start with leadership, sadly, because you're talking about a role model, and I'm a big fan of that, and I've had great role models, men and women actually, and really tried hard to do that myself. And one of the things that I do, this is going to sound really silly now, I'm going to say it out loud, but it took me until I was 32 to have the confidence to have sparkly nails to work, because that's not a done thing, is it? You've got to conform in your dark suit and all the rest of it. And so, it was another female leader who taught me you can bring your whole self to work as a woman. And that's not just about the things you say, it's about how you dress, it's about how you present yourself. And I think that kind of whole self to work obviously goes across not just gender, but any individual. And so it is about creating those safe spaces, the safe to say, the culture that goes alongside that, so people feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. And, you talk there about some of the issues that particularly relate to women, and I absolutely agree with that. But there are things that men go through just as much and that we don't acknowledge, and they should feel that they could talk about those things in a workplace as well, and let people know what's going on for them. So I do think that sadly, ultimately, it's a leadership role modelling thing, because then people feel comfortable, and if you can make people feel comfortable, they're more likely to share their own stuff.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a duty of care that comes with leadership, and I think historically we haven't done enough to make sure that leaders understand that duty of care. Leadership traditionally has just been about the numbers, about performance, and we haven't really linked it to people, and people, I think we'll all acknowledge, are the heart of our business, whether that's internally or externally. And I think with that comes the responsibility for us as leaders to care about other people's journeys, to take that time out to say, actually, you seem a little bit off today. Is there anything happening in your personal life, or anything that we can do to support you? And I think once you give that level of care, it's reciprocated in terms of people feeling brought in to you as an organisation, to you as a leader, and you ultimately get the returns from it. But it can't just be about the returns, it's about people's experiences. And I think it relates to what we were saying about kind of the community care side of things as well. Once we truly care about people, that should shape everything that we do in the business.
Well, I think it comes back to what you introduced at NGN, Heather, and it's probably the first time I've sat probably for a long time actually, I've sat in a meeting where the first question that gets asked is, so how are you today? But really, how are you today? And nothing's off the table. And so we do that now as our leadership team, but that's because you introduced that. And to start off with, it was probably quite work dominated. Well, I've got a lot on my plate, but it very quickly became my dad's poorly and I'm feeling a 2 out of 10 today because of this. I think as soon as you start to have those conversations, then you can mention, I'm on the first day of my period and I don't feel very comfortable actually today. I feel a bit fat, or I'm just not. But it's about that, just how are you? Really, how are you? And my reflection would be those are happening in our team meeting, but I couldn't say they're happening across our leadership community per se, and I think it should do, because I think if it starts in that room, then it will go out into the organisation. And if it's okay to just say how you're feeling generally about anything that's going on, then naturally those things that are particular to women, those things that are particular men, will come through, won't they? Without it just being specifically about that.
Thank you. That is all we've got time for, as we've hit the nail on 8 o'clock. I'm sorry that there are not time for more questions. I know a few people got trains, but we're not all rushing off. So by all means, come and grab us if you have any other questions. I'd like to just ask you to say thank you to our amazing panel, Matt, Eileen, Louise and Denise. And just a summary to leave you with. I thought our event started really nicely with the message that the panel would not want to be anywhere else tonight. They wanted to be part of this in the room where it happens. Anyone a Hamilton fan? That's me. Yeah. We're in the room where it happens tonight. I like the comment about how not only do we need to notice the gaps, but we need to move to action. I think there were lots of really good tips for you all to take away personally or in your organisations to put into practice after tonight. The importance of leadership in sponsoring some of this change, and everybody in leadership positions here needs to think about that and share that with colleagues as well, because they need to be advocates for change as well as those people that really feel passionately about it. I loved Mac's comment about networks are a gift to organisations. I thought that's I'm sure something NGN Women's Network going to have as a little tagline going forward. I think the importance of listening to colleagues and customers, particularly through the lens of really understanding the real experiences they're going through, and the community's point raised by the colleague at the back there, and thinking about not only what's important to them now, but what are their real asks for the future. And I think particularly in the utility sector, that's incumbent on all of us to think about that through that lens. The idea of thinking about the human impact of investments as well, continuing that theme is important. So I think it's, incumbent on all of us to go away from tonight not just having attended a nice event and had a sandwich and a bit of a laugh, but to go and think about what change we want to make, whether it's a small one or a big one. And a couple of things I think we could think about is get back to networking. So think about how you can do that. So gold star for turning up tonight, like Louise said. Think about how you can build your own confidence in speaking up, and whether that's in a small way, finding a safe space to talk to somebody about something, or being really brave and thinking about how you create that psychological safety. Listening, the other side of that. So think about how you really listen to people, and the conversation we just had there about how are you really feeling, I think is really important, and a lesson we should all have learnt through the pandemic, if not at all. And my final suggestion that we all do after tonight is stop apologising so much. Thank you, everybody.